Okay, what I'd like to do today is start a new series of videos looking at music theory as it directly relates to the practice of playing the guitar. Rather than thinking about music theory in an entirely theoretical manner, I want to look at it as it directly relates to guitar playing and communication between different musicians. So, what we're going to start off with is the major scale. And I'm going to play here a G major scale, starting at the 3rd fret of the bottom A, then coming up to an A, 2nd fret of the A, 3rd fret of the A, open D, 2nd fret of the D, 4th fret of the D, and then open G. There is one octave of a G major scale. So, what do I mean by any of those words? An octave is just a way of saying 8 notes. And if we count those notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We've got 8 notes there. So an octave is just 8 notes through a major scale. And that gets us round to another G. If we start on a G, count up 8 notes of a major scale, we're going to finish on another G. So we have an octave. What's a major scale? A major scale is that do, re, mi scale, the sound of which we are very familiar with. And why have I picked the G major scale? Well, I've picked that for one good reason. It's a little bit more in my range for singing, and we're going to see why, because we're going to learn all the intervals within this major scale, and we're going to internalise those intervals by humming them or singing the intervals. What do I mean by an interval? An interval is the distance between 2 notes. So the first note we have in our scale is this G on the 3rd fret of the bottom E string. Yeah? And the first interval we've got to discuss is a unison. So that would be this G note played against itself, which I can't do on the guitar. I can't get 2 Gs at this octave. I can get 2 Gs at another octave. If I play this 5th fret of the D string, that's a G, and my open G is also a G. Now we hear the sound of a unison. Obviously, no point humming it because it's the same note heard twice, but you can hear that there is a difference between hearing the one note once and the one note twice. There's always a slight difference in pitch between the 2 notes, however slight, which just lends a certain thickness to the notes that we're hearing. Okay. The next interval we need to talk about is the interval to the 2nd note in the scale. So from the G here to the A here. Da, da. That's an interval called a major second. And we can hear the 2 notes played together like this. Instantly you can hear that that is what we call a dissonance. That means we can hear a disagreement between those 2 notes. We can hear an argument, some beating between those 2 pitches. But that's a major second, and we're going to memorise that by thinking of a song which uses those 2 notes as the first 2 notes of its melody. In this particular case, it would be Silent Night. Da, da. That's the distance of a major second. Okay, the next interval we're going to have a look at in our major scale would be between the root, the G note here, and the 3rd note in the scale. Now, if this B note here on the 2nd fret of the A string, if we play those 2 together, you can hear that there is no dissonance there. In fact, we call this a consonance. Those are 2 notes that do not argue. They sound really good together. This is an interval we call a major third. Da, da. So remember to hum along with me as we play these intervals, and then you'll internalise the sound of them and learn the name of the sound at the same time. So we've got our major third, and the melody that begins with those 2 notes, a major third, would be When the Saints Come Marching In. there's the distance of a major third. The next note in our scale as we move up is the fourth note here. The C note on the third fret of the A string, and that distance between the root, our G, and the C, or between the first degree of the scale and the fourth degree of the scale, we call a perfect fourth. This is called perfect rather than major because this interval is stable, it doesn't want to go anywhere. Let's just rewind a moment to our major third. We said that it was a consonance, it sounded pleasant, but it has some implied movement there. It wants to go somewhere. And then it feels at rest. Yeah? But this perfect fourth is entirely at rest. It doesn't want to go anywhere, and hence it's called perfect. So the melody that starts with the perfect fourth would be Here Comes the Bride. Da, da. There we go. That's the sound of a perfect fourth. The next interval in our scale is up to the fifth note in the scale. Again, that's called a perfect fifth. Completely stable, doesn't want to go anywhere, and the melody that starts with a perfect fifth is the theme tune for Star Wars. Da, da. Hopefully I played enough of it for you to get the reference there. So there is the perfect fifth. Okay, the next note in our scale is the sixth of the scale. And from the root of our major scale up to that sixth degree, that's a major sixth. Da, da. The melody that this starts with this interval would be For He's a Jolly Good Fellow. So you can now internalise and memorise that distance of a major sixth. Then we've just got two more to go, and we've got our root up to the seventh note of the scale. This fourth fret of the D, which happens to be an F sharp. There is the sound of a major seventh interval. Okay? So the melody that begins with the major seventh interval, as the intervals get wider and wider apart, the number of melodies that start with those two notes become rarer and rarer. And the only melody I know of that starts with a major seven would be the old theme tune to the Superman film that came out in the late 70s, I think. Yeah, I think you know the tune. So that is the distance of a major seventh. So again, we can hum that, internalise it, memorise it. And then the last note that we've got is our octave. The eighth note in our major scale, which is a G to a G. Now, the octave, there is a song that starts with an octave, and that would be Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Okay, so there is the sound of an octave. Again, we can internalise that by humming it and memorise it and its name. Now, this is going to give us a basis for looking at chords. We have to memorise intervals before we can really start looking at chords, because chords are created from intervals. Okay, so what we've done there is we've played a major scale, and then we've played and memorised and internalised every single interval from the root through that major scale. There we go. Okay, hopefully that helps. Practice that. Think about the tunes as you hum the notes, and that's really going to help you memorise the tunes. Okay, there we go. Happy practicing.